Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're excited to see you here. We appreciate you joining us today. Good afternoon. This webinar will be recorded for our presentation today. Welcome, everybody. This is the third day, second week of the Northern California College Promise Coalition's financial aid webinar series. And we're very excited to have our guest presenter today, who I'll introduce in just a moment. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen to walk us through what we're going to be discussing today. And can I just get a thumbs up that you can see my screen? Awesome, thank you. So first, my name is Meredith Curry. I go by Mare, pronouns she, her. I'm in East San Jose. I'm the executive director of the Northern California College Promise Coalition, which is a collective impact approach bringing together leaders, practitioners, and resources here in the Northern California region to transform communities. We believe that together we can change the trajectory for tens of thousands of Northern California students. Collectively, our 32 members serve over 58,000 high school and college students across the 9 Bay Area counties, Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Tulare. And we appreciate the leadership and thought partnership of our steering committee, champion and advocate members, and our advisory council. You can learn more about our membership on our website. We want to also encourage you to please be sure to check out the other sessions that we have in store for you after today and register. Please help us promote the financial aid webinar series to your colleagues and fellow college access and success professionals in your network. We also are extremely grateful for the partnership of the Cal State, the University of California, the California Community Colleges, Immigrants Rising, Money Think, and Nadja Jepson, who've all worked together to provide this program for you over the next couple weeks. Please stay tuned for an announcement about a presentation from the California Independents. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Noelia Gonzalez, Interim System-Wide Director of Financial Aid Programs at the California State University. Noelia has over 20 years of experience in higher education administration. She started as a financial aid counselor and moved up to associate director at CSU Northridge. Along the way, she served in various leadership positions with the California Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, centered around state and federal issues. She also served on the Grant Advisory Committee with the California Student Aid Commission. Noelia has a BA in Business Administration from Loyola Marymount University and an MA in Education Administration with an emphasis in educational leadership and policy studies from CSU Northridge. As a proud recipient of my MBA from Cal State Long Beach, I'm glad to have the CSU here and want to encourage you all that before you leave today after the presentation, please complete the exit ticket and let Noelia know how you thought about the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Noelia. Welcome.
Thank you, Mare. I'm going to go ahead and share screens for the presentation. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. As Mare said, I'm currently the Interim System-Wide Director for Financial Aid Programs here at the CSU Chancellor's Office. I've been here at the Chancellor's Office since about April of 2021, so last year, just under a year. Prior to that, I was at Cal State Stanislaus, so I'm located currently in the Central Valley. My last position there was Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management. Like Mare said, I've been in financial aid and in higher education for over 20 years. Almost all my experience has been in the California State University system. I'll go ahead and get started. I did want to share with everybody that we will be taking some questions throughout the presentation on chat, but there will be an opportunity at the end of the presentation. We'll unmute everybody and you can go ahead and ask questions. I'll go ahead and get started. So the CSU, this is our snapshot, sorry, for the most recent year that we've reported financially, the 2020-2021 academic year. We do have more than $4 billion in financial aid paid to almost 400,000 students. 71% of that financial aid is in grants, scholarship, or waivers. So it is funding that is free to the student. They don't have to repay or return. We have about 46% of our students do graduate with student debt, and our average debt at graduation is just over $18,000. That is 37% below the national average of almost $29,000. Just to kind of put it in perspective, what does that $4 billion look like? We do award and disperse about $1.1 billion in federal grants, $944 million in CSU grants, scholarships, and waivers, and that includes a state university grant. Over $821 million in California state grants in the form of either a Cal grant, the middle class scholarship, Chafee grants. Just over $15 million in federal work study, and just over $1.1 billion in federal student loans. Our philosophy is really to keep the CSU as affordable as possible for the residents of the state of California. We do strive to fund a student's full need, and we do include all the costs of cost in a student's cost of attendance. So it's not just fees. We include transportation, books, room and board, miscellaneous expenses. So we do try to keep those costs as affordable as possible for students. We have not had a fee increase in, I'd say 6 or 7 years, if not a little longer. We have kept our costs pretty low over the last few years. Of course, we do ask the state of California for funding every year so that we can keep the cost to the students low. For financial aid, as we know, the deadline is tomorrow, or the priority deadline is tomorrow, March 2nd. So we have been doing a lot of work to make sure that students have filed either their free application for federal student aid or their California application for application for DREAM Act. That's a CADA for our undocumented students. Those both have a priority deadline by March 2nd. So students that submit their applications by tomorrow will be fully reviewed for eligibility in all aid programs, federal and state. Some of our aid programs do have limited funding. So for example, SCOG is one of our federal grant programs, a supplemental educational opportunity grant. We do have limited funding in that. So we do a first come, first serve, but there is a priority deadline. So students that file by that March 2nd deadline are the ones that will be considered for that grant. It's important that students do that and submit. They don't have to submit all the documents to the university, but that FAFSA or the CADA does need to be in by March 2nd. Once that application is submitted to either the feds, that's a FAFSA, or CADA to the Student Aid Commission, it comes up with what we call an expected family contribution, or an EFC. That is one of the tenets of how we award or package student financial aid. We use that expected family contribution. That information will be released to the universities once a student will download that information once a student has been admitted. So a student submits their application for admissions, let's say to the CSU sometime in October. Hopefully they did their FAFSA also back then, or if not, they're just getting it done. Once they're admitted, we'll start downloading the free what we call a student aid report, and we'll get that expected family contribution. The EFC number is based on a whole bunch of different things that a student submits, but essentially it's a review of a point in time of a student's financial information or parents if they're a dependent student, and they take a look at financial and household information. And it kind of gives us an expectation of what a family can contribute towards that child or that student's education for that year. The FAFSA and CADA is an annual application, meaning that students do need to submit it every year. I'll take a pause, Mary, in case there are any questions on anything that I've covered so far.
Thanks for pausing. No questions yet in the chat. If there are any questions, folks want to post it right now. think you're good to keep going.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this is what goes into our cost of attendance. Again, one of the tenets of packaging financial aid at the CSU. We do look at the students' tuition fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation, personal and miscellaneous expenses. On some campuses, it could be called a budget or a cost of attendance, but it does include all the items above. And those are, except for the tuition and fees, variable costs. Meaning that, we know that the state university fee is one charge. The campus will also have campus fees, and those are standard for every student. All the other fees are predicated on the student's individual situation. So for example, are they living at home? Are they living on campus? Are they in an off-campus apartment? What kind of books are they buying? Sometimes some majors have more expensive books than others. Sometimes students can rent their books. Sometimes students or the professors just have online resources, so they're trying to keep those book costs down. Art students will have art supplies. Transportation really covers getting the student to and from the campus. So that is also different based if the student is living on campus. We know that those are lower transportation costs than if a student's off campus. And then personal and miscellaneous. We do have average cost of attendances for students. So for example, we have an average cost of attendance for students living off campus. However, a student can also control those costs, and it could be cheaper depending on how many roommates they have. Do they have one roommate? Are they in an apartment by themselves? Are they renting a house with 3 or 4 friends? So those are all variable costs based on the students. The one, when a student does receive their financial aid, the campuses will first keep the funding to pay for tuition and fees. And then if they have any on-campus housing, they'll keep those funds as well to pay for those charges. If a student is not on campus and they have enough financial aid to cover their tuition and fees, anything remaining will be released to the student for the student to go ahead and pay for their rent, or if they're living at home, if they're helping their families out with the bills at home, they can do that as well. Car payments, whatever it is that the student has, those educational expenses. But the only fees that are paid directly to the universities will be that tuition and fees and any on-campus housing charges. This is a sample cost of attendance for the CSU, what it looks like with parents on campus or off campus. We have, again, that state university fee at $57.42. That's for the year. So for the fall and spring semesters, if you're at a quarter campus, I believe San Luis Obispo is our last remaining quarter campus. That's going to be fall, winter, spring. It's going to be the same charge. Then there's the charges of campus fees. Campus fees cover things like the health center fee, the associated students fee. There's a few other organizations that it's covered by the campus fees that are student-led organizations. That's going to be the average is $17.17. Some campuses are higher, some campuses are lower, but this is just an average estimated cost. The average books and supplies, room and board for each of the 3 living situations. So again, with parents off campus and on campus. The transportation costs, personal miscellaneous, so that gives us a total cost. Again, you see that it goes from, it could be $20,000 is that total cost of attendance to almost $30,000 based on the student's living situation. That's going to be the driver. Once we have that cost of attendance and the expected family contribution, we have what we call need. Need is essentially the cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution. So students can receive what's considered need-based aid. That's all grants, subsidized student loans, federal work-study programs, outside aid, if they're getting it from an outside organization. Sometimes it's a university scholarship. That all goes towards the student's need. And we do package, or we try to package up to the student's need. We don't have an additional self-help requirement like some of the other institutions have. So we don't look at the student should contribute $9,000 from work or loan. We do not take that into consideration. For us, it's just a straight cost of attendance minus expected family contribution equals need, and we package up to that need. Any funding that is above need, so for if a student has expected family contribution, we do fund with either a parent loan or we can fund with an unsubsidized student loan. And I'm going to go through some examples of what our packaging looks like so you can know what that looks like. Okay, this is a sample package. This is a student that has, and I just kind of chose round numbers because it makes life a little bit easier for the math. This student has a cost of attendance of $25,000. They have an expected family contribution of 0, which means their need is $25,000. They have a need for $25,000. A student with this situation, this is what a typical package would look like. They would have a Pell Grant for $64.95. They would have a Cal Grant B, provided that they submitted that application by March 2nd. To cover their fees. So that's a state university fee amount. They would also be eligible for the Cal Grant B Access, which is an additional amount for our lowest income students from the Cal Grant program. And we would award them, for example, a supplemental educational opportunity grant of $1,000. Those 4 items are what we would consider scholarship and grant funding and are automatically put into the accept for the student, because we know that students, of course, want the best packaging that they don't have to return or pay back or do anything for. So we automatically, when we award a student those funds, we put it into what we call an offer and accept situation. Then, because we know that the student still has more need, they have remaining need, we'll go ahead and award a subsidized loan. For example, this is a freshman student for $3,500. And a federal work study award for $4,000. Both of those would be offered to the student, and then the student can determine if they choose to accept them. We don't impose it on a student, we just make sure that they know that it's available to them should they need it. So we know that the student's total award is it's just over $22,000, which will get them, fairly close to that $25,000 need. This student is fairly similar as well. Again, a cost of $25,000 cost of attendance, 0 expected family contribution. They have a need of $25,000, but this student has been awarded a scholarship. They have a $2,000 scholarship. So how does this $2,000 scholarship fit into this student's cost of attendance and expected family contribution and need calculation? When we go ahead, because we know that the student has, again, need of $25,000, when we package in, add the $2,000 scholarship to this student, it brings his total award under $24,000 to $24,385, which is still under the student's need of $25,000. So again, we would package a student with this award and it would have no effect on the student's other financial aid awards, because there is still room in their need. There's still room in their package. I'll take a minute here to see if anybody has any questions about this particular situation.
I don't see any questions yet, Noelia, but I did post a link in the chat to see if that first part of cost of attendance by campus, if that Cal State link I posted is still the right one to explore campus cost of attendance.
Yes, that should be the right one, correct.
Great. Thank you.
And that website will have all of the 23, you can pick your campus and link to their page with their cost of attendance. So it's a really helpful website. All right, we'll move on. This is another student, another packaging example. This particular student has an expected family contribution of $5,000. Again, student has a cost of attendance of $25,000. Expected family contribution of $5,000. So now the student only needs $20,000 for funding. Anything awarded between the $20,000 and $25,000 would be what we consider non-need-based aid. Non-need-based aid is an unsubsidized loan or a parent loan. So a student with this expected family contribution would have a Pell Grant of about $1,545. They would be eligible for a Cal Grant A. They would have their subsidized loan and federal work study award as well. And then after that, they'd be eligible for an unsubsidized loan and a parent loan in the amount of just over $8,000, totaling a $25,000 financial aid award. Again, the $2,000 of unsubsidized loan and the parent loan of $8,213, those are both considered non-need-based aid. So that's why we can award past their $20,000 of need up to their cost of attendance. They still have to stay in that cost of attendance realm. What happens if this student is awarded a scholarship? Here we go. So we have a student, again, same situation. This student has been awarded, after we've packaged them with their federal financial aid, federal and state, they've been awarded a $5,000 scholarship. What happens to their financial aid award in that case? Again, remembering that the student has only a need of $20,000. So when we package a scholarship, we go ahead and award the scholarship, the student's Pell Grant, and the Cal Grant, which gives them about just over $12,000 of need-based financial aid. So it's still within their need. And then they're awarded, of grant funding. They still have some room between the $20,000 and the $12,000 and a little bit for need-based aid. So we're able to award the subsidized loan and the federal work study as well. The student still has room because there have not yet been awarded up to their cost of attendance. So we can award a $2,000 unsubsidized loan. Where the difference is we had to make room for that scholarship, we had to reduce the parent loan to keep the student within the cost of attendance of $25,000. So when we receive a scholarship for a student that has been awarded up to either their need or cost of attendance, we'll always reduce the non-need based aid first, so a parent loan or an unsubsidized loan. After that, we'll reduce what's considered self-help aid. So we'll reduce the student's loan first, and then the federal work study before we touch grants or any other funding, free money that the student has received. So any questions on this? I know that the scholarship displacement has been an issue and there have been a lot of questions on it. At the CSU, the majority of our students who bring in outside scholarships, depending on the amounts, typically don't have an adjustment to their other financial aid unless they have a high expected family contribution. All right.
For that, Noelia, there was one question that came in, and this was regarding, I think, the slide just before this. So the example without the scholarship, but the 5,000 EFC. The question is, why would the student loan not be subsidized? And that made it be to clarify for those lines that you have there.
This package would be for a freshman student, and the $3,500 is the maximum subsidized loan a freshman can receive. If we're looking at a sophomore student, the maximum would be a $4,500 subsidized loan. And then juniors and seniors are eligible for a maximum of $5,500. So it does go up with each academic year. But the freshman students, this is their maximum subsidized loan that they're eligible is $3,500. All right.
There's a question following up. Why does it go up?
Those are the federal loan limits that have been put into with the Higher Education Act and federal law. A word about special circumstances and income appeals. As I mentioned earlier, the FAFSA and the CADA are both based on a point in time review. So for example, the student submits a FAFSA in October. It's their financial situation, what's going on in their lives at that point, and it's using the financial or the income tax information from the year prior. So for the 2022, the fall class of 2022, they're using their 2020 family taxes or student taxes on that FAFSA or that CADA. We know that in 2 years, a lot can happen, as we've seen with what's going on in the world or what's been going on in the last few years with the pandemic. So we have a system in place, or there is a mechanism in place for students to request what we call a special circumstance or an income appeal. They're essentially the same thing. It's just on different campuses, it might be called something different. But if a student has submitted their application and something has changed, somebody has lost a job or somebody's income has been reduced, Maybe somebody, God forbid, passed away, or there's something that they've lost financially, or there's been a change to their household. They're able to submit a special circumstance or an income appeal request to base their financial aid on what is currently happening in their lives. So for example, a student submits a FAFSA, their family in 2020 made $100,000 and their dad lost their job. And now in 2022, their family income is going to go down to $65,000. They can request an income appeal from the campus that they'll be attending to reevaluate and resubmit their FAFSA information to get a lower expected family contribution. And then we would be able to determine if the student is eligible for additional funding, either a greater Pell Grant, other greater grants. So it's important that if things change or something happens in a student's life, that they talk to the financial aid office of the campus that they're attending. The other situation that we come across pretty often is what we call a dependency override. And again, a student may be under the age of 24, the recent high school grad, they're requiring parental information on the applications, but they're not able to submit that information. So students in that situation should again contact their financial aid office, and we can do what's called a dependency override, where we would override that student's dependency status based on their individual situation to make them an independent student, and they wouldn't have to submit their parental information on that FAFSA. So it's important that students stay in contact. A student can go ahead and submit their FAFSA. For example, let's say that they submitted their FAFSA in October and they didn't know where they were going to go to school without parental information or signature. That will go to the Department of Education. It'll produce a student aid report by March 2nd. That's important. We want them to submit at least that initial FAFSA by March 2nd. And then when they've figured out, oh, I think I'm going to go to San Jose State, or I'm going to go to Cal State East Bay, they'll go to the financial aid office and let them know, I have the situation, I couldn't have my parent signature or their information on my application. What are the steps on your campus so that I can do a dependency override? Let's see. All right. Another thing to note is that financial aid does have limits. So it's important that students use their financial aid wisely, that when they get to a university, that they start making a plan to graduation. So what are the courses I need to take? How many units can I take a semester? Can I take 15 units so I can finish in 4 years or close to 15? Does my academic career mean that I might have to take some classes during the summer to stay on pace? All of that is important. Students should make that budget. The longer that a student is in school, the more out-of-pocket expenses they will have. So we at the CSU, we've made great improvements with our GI 2025 initiative to get students graduating closer to 4 years. So we're moving on those goals, but it's important that students from the first day they get onto our campus, on any one of our 23 campuses, they start making the graduation plan that very first day so that they are always on track. The campuses, we've invested a lot of money in academic advising, in what we call SSI, so supplemental instruction, to help students get through some of those courses that are a little bit more difficult, probably in math. So it's important that the students are aware of what is available to them so that they can go and ask for help when they feel they need it. But again, that financial aid does have limits. So if they are around too long, they're going to run out of funding and we won't be able to award them to make sure that they get to graduation. And these are some of those limits. So a federal Pell Grant, a student has 6 years of full-time eligibility. If they go longer than the 6 years, they'll be out of Pell Grant eligibility. Cal Grant has 4 years at full time as well. So if a student comes to our campus, if they're a freshman, they have 4 years. If they transfer in as a junior, they have a Cal Grant that they're bringing with them, they have 2 years of Cal Grant eligibility. So it's important that students stay on track. We also monitor what we call satisfactory academic progress. So we monitor to ensure that students are progressing towards graduation, that they're completing the units that they've attempted, and that they are moving and keeping a GPA so that they can graduate We would love all of our students to graduate in 4 years. We know that's not the case, but we try to support them through at least the six years that they're enrolled. So we do try to keep them enrolled. Once if a student's been around for 4 years, they've run out of Cal Grant, if eligible at that point, we would then award them a state university grant, because again, our goal is to make sure that students make it to graduation. But there are limits. So it's important that students, again, from day one, they hit that ground running and they start talking to advisors, they start making a plan to get them graduated as close to 4 years as possible if they're coming in as freshmen. All right, we can unmute, and if anyone has any questions, I'll stop sharing screen. And I'm good to go.
Thank you so much, Noelia. I did drop one question. I've heard some of our members use Swift Student through FormSwift as a resource to help navigate the appeals process. And I'm just curious if you have a sense of if campuses or the system accepts or works with students who might have that.
Most of the campuses have, I don't think that they have Swift Student, but they have a program called Campus Logic. So students can do things online and upload documents, or they have another form of doing things online.
Almost professional.
Yeah. The pandemic really forced all the campuses to figure out how to do things electronically versus coming in with a piece of paper or making a phone call. Or fax. That was another popular one that, I know that while we were at Stanislaus when the pandemic first hit, we had a lot of fax. And so we moved away from that since we couldn't go into the offices, and we went to an electronic format. So if there's ever a positive, right, that came out of this is really allowing the campuses and the universities to really get into into the new century.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Noelia. There's a hand raised. Jackie, feel free to unmute yourself if you'd prefer.
Hello, I'm so sorry I had unmuted in anticipation. So my name is Jackie Navarez. I'm the College and Career Pathways Counselor for Elk Grove. Thank you so much for presenting today. I'm just delighted. I'm sharing it with one of my CSU colleagues as well. So she's watching with me as well. But my question for you is, with the student who's looking at taking a gap year, what would be the impact on their Cal Grant? And what should they do to notify the California Student Aid Commission that they were intending to take a gap year?
Oh, so students that are taking that gap year and they're a freshman, they're planning on coming in as a freshman?
Yes.
So the good thing is that Cal Grant has two ways to qualify as a freshman. They can either apply their first year straight out of college, or they can apply that second year as well. We call it a 1-year delay. So my recommendation for the student is to go ahead and contact the California Student Aid Commission now to let them know I'm taking a gap year. Can you put my Cal Grant on hold? But in addition, next year, because they won't be in school. So the kind of, I know we email our applicants all the time, letting them know, hey, don't forget to submit your FAFSA or CADA by March 2nd. I know the high schools do the same thing. So make sure that they remember that next year they need to submit that FAFSA by that March 2nd deadline.
And in regards to our school district, we actually do also submit our seniors in that following year as well. So, we'll submit our current seniors and then our last year seniors as well. So would that suffice to support their GPA? Okay, fantastic. Yes. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great question. Anybody else have any questions? And feel free to type it into this chat or to unmute yourself. You can raise your hand if you'd prefer. And while we're waiting for a few more questions, Noelia, do you have any advice for how students can access scholarships at their own campuses? I think my understanding is the campuses themselves tend to track the scholarships local in their areas. I think it might be by department or other opportunities.
Yes, all the CSUs, if they go to their financial aid office, it's typically a financial aid and scholarship office. And so all the campus scholarships will be available on that website as well. And there's I think all of the campuses have, again, an electronic way of applying. It's a different software system where they go in, they submit all their information, name, all their identifying information, they answer all the questions. And then automatically, when we start processing and looking to start packaging these awards, we'll upload the admissions information. So we'll have the GPA. If the student I don't know that any of the scholarships look at SAT or ACTs anymore. So we'll really just look at the student's GPA, that they've been admitted. You know, depending on the scholarship, some scholarships are based on zip code, right? So we'll pull all that information in and we'll determine who's eligible. From there, we'll notify the students and we'll say, hey, you're eligible for these 10 scholarships. Here's what you need to do for them. You know, you need to write an essay, or you've already submitted the application. We're going to consider you for it. We'll let you know. So it just depends on, you know, the scholarships are based on donors and what they've put in there. So when we work with the donors, we try to make it as simple as possible and to not have 50 things that they require, but most of them will require an essay. Most of them will require, you know, a set of questions of what are you going to do in your life and why should we give you the scholarship, essentially. But students can connect to through their campus financial aid offices.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Noelia.
Yeah.
Someone posted a question, but it looks like it was directed to me, so I'm going to read it out loud. Is there data, this is around work study, is there data on how many students are offered work study and how many of those actually get a work study position? Is there a realistic work study amount that students can expect to get?
We don't have any data really around the individual campuses, how they package. Each campus has their kind of individual of what works for them, packaging policy for federal work study. So some campuses will award everybody a federal work study award that's eligible, and then they'll let the student go and look for a job on campus. Sometimes that creates difficulty because there's a lot more students awarded federal work study than federal work study jobs. Some campuses will limit how many federal work study students they'll package at the beginning to ensure that those students have an opportunity to look for employment. And then once, you know, it's kind of settled, school has started, they may go back and repackage or pick up more students, the students that are either maybe missed the March 2nd deadline or have a higher expected family contribution. There are a lot of on-campus jobs, both federal work study and just student assistant, so non-federal work study jobs as well. So we are, you know, it's been a little difficult the last couple of years because obviously we haven't been on campuses to have work study students, or we've had very few, only the ones that were able to work or be employed remote. But there is a lot of work, I think, with the campuses coming back to campuses. There'll be a lot more work coming in, like, for example, at the library, the accounting offices, financial aid offices, we hire students, admissions and outreach, student ASI, housing. So there'll be, I think in this next academic year, we'll see an uptick of jobs available just because the last years we haven't been on campus. That $15 million is low. It's a low amount, and it's low because that was pandemic reporting. And so what we were able to do with that pandemic, with the federal work study that we were issued by the Department of Education, is if we didn't spend it on work study jobs, we were able to convert those into supplemental educational opportunity program grants. So we were able to shift the money from a work study to a SCOG, a grant, so that we made sure that we use the funds. In the future, that was, you know, kind of an exception that we had due to the pandemic. In the future, those will remain work study funds. And I know that as campuses go back, they're going to want to be hiring students.
That's good to know, Noelia. And do campuses work with community-based organizations to potentially open work study positions off campus? Is that
some campuses do, and some campuses don't. The most popular one that we have is called the America Reads program. So where we're training literacy tutors to go out into the local elementary schools to teach reading. Some do, some campuses, depending on where they're located, will be working and they'll have contracts with organizations outside of the universities. I see here somebody posted California Volunteers. That is something also that 16 of our campuses do have funding for next year, starting in the 22-23 academic year. So we're still working out those details. In fact, how that's going to affect. The California College Corps is a little different than the federal work study because it's tied to, it's really a volunteer position where the student is getting what we used to call a stipend, but they are getting, some funding to help them, and then an additional award after they're done with their volunteer to pay for school. So a $3,000 tuition award, essentially. Those funds will get coordinated with the student's financial aid. So what we'll see is, will a student be eligible for work study, or will they want to do the California volunteer? They probably can't do both, because we don't want students to work too many hours. We want to keep them to about 20. There's a third program coming into play next year as well, called the Leveraging Academic Education. It's LAEP. It's a new state program. We're calling it kind of like a state federal work study or state work study program. Again, it's brand new. We're working out all the kinks to it and trying to figure out where the universities are signing a participation agreements. This is a very similar program to federal work study, except that the student's employment will have to be based on the student's course of study. So a major, whatever they're studying. So we wouldn't have a bio major working, at a library, but we'd have to team up a biology student with a lab experience, or a social work student with a social service experience. And so it's a little bit more complicated than the regular federal work study job. So all those three programs, we're going to have to figure out how to coordinate all three of them. And it's ultimately going to be up to the student, right? What kind of experience the student wants to have.
It's so exciting, though, to have all those different opportunities and options. Thanks for sharing that. There was also a question around the Cal Grant. If a student applied to a Cal State and was awarded a Cal Grant, but then decides to go to community college instead of the Cal State, would they reapply for the Cal Grant 2 years down the road? Or is there any action they need to take now if they don't use the Cal Grant this year to be eligible in the future?
So the student will need to go onto their web grants account and change their school to ensure that the school that they're attending is the community college that they're choosing to attend. Typically, a student, depending on, can carry their Cal Grant or put it on hold for 2 years until they transfer to a 4-year school. The problem then becomes, if a student doesn't transfer in 2 years, what happens to their Cal Grant? But they'll have to be in communication with the Student Aid Commission, letting them know their plans, that they want to put on hold, to make sure that that Cal Grant is protected for when the student decides to attend a 4-year.
These are really great questions, everyone. And we still have another 10 to 15 minutes if you have burning questions with this expert that we have here today. And just so you know, you've received some affirmation that the presentation's been very helpful so far, Noelia.
Yes, I saw that. Thank you.
All right, looking to see if there's any other questions besides that one that I shared with that has access to the different campus costs of attendance. Are there any other pearls in terms of useful links on the Cal State website folks may not know about?
Well, that same financial aid website at the Cal State, at the CSU, will link them to all the financial aid offices as well. So that's important. So it's not just they want to have all that information of the campus website. So once a student decides, or if you have a student that's telling us, oh, I'm going to go to Sac State, link them up to that website, because that'll be campus specific information, their dates, their deadlines, their scholarship information. So that'll all be on there. And I believe most campuses, their offices are reopening up. I think yesterday, the 28th, yesterday. No, 2 days ago. Today's the 1st. So yesterday, Monday, it's been a long week and it's only Tuesday. On Monday, I believe all of our 23 campuses are back and open. So, students now have a place to come in, to ask questions if they're coming in with their parents. I know that there are still some mask mandates, and the campuses will work on that, but we are open and we are ready to meet with students and get to know them again, and we're excited about that.
Yes, that's exciting. Do you have any sense of Chancellor conference timing this year?
Same time, they'll be in person this year. So we are planning on having a Northern California, I think 2 in Southern California, and maybe 2 in Northern California. Like there's usually one in the Bay Area and one more in the Sacramento area, and then one in the, I think, Pasadena area, and then one in San Diego. So we're excited to be back face to face and not remote or virtual. We're hoping that this recovery from the pandemic continues so that we don't have to change again. So we'll see where we are in September, but we're looking at the same kind of time frame as usual in the early fall.
Yeah, like late September, early
Yeah, late September. We have to coordinate with the UCs and when they're doing theirs. So usually like we work on the calendar together. So we're excited. We're excited just to, see human beings again and not just in a little box.
Yes, I think we all are. Well, thank you so much for your time, Noelia. I just want to see, are there any other questions, folks? Okay, here's one.
Okay.
Thanks for answering the question above regarding the Cal grant. If a student does not take an action to transfer the grant for future use, will they be ineligible to apply down the road to apply for Cal grant, say in 2 to 3 years?
No, they can reapply. Yeah, they can reapply. It's different if they like applied, use their Cal grant, you can't it's harder to reapply for it, but if they never use their Cal grant, they can reapply for it. Absolutely.
And there's, it came to me, but it's some clarification on Cal Grant B total for freshmen. Is it just the living allowance or the Cal Grant A amount plus the living allowance?
So the Cal Grant B for freshmen, if you're attending California State University, the Cal Grant B access comes from the 1,648. They get that from the state. The CSU will then award the student the state university grant to cover the fees. So if we have a Cal B student from the state, we're only getting the first year. We're only getting that access amount. But then the CSU will use their own funding to pay for the students' fees.
And they said, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Okay, folks, last call. These are great questions. Noelia obviously knows her stuff. What else do we want to know? While we're waiting for those few last questions, I'm just going to take this moment to drop into the chat the exit ticket link. So just a reminder to please share, and if you could actually take this opportunity to use a reaction and just let Noelia know how you felt about the presentation today. And please share feedback about the presentation using our exit ticket. We do have a raffle that you'll be entered in. But again, thank you so much, Noelia. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I think this was great. I mean, I like that it wasn't, you always want these to be a little bigger, but I like that it's smaller just so you can have an opportunity to ask your questions and really have it be more of a conversation. So thank you for having me today, Mayor.
Agreed. And thank you so much. I'm happy to take it to the close then, since we don't have any other questions. Just thank you so much. Be sure to check out the other sessions, complete that exit ticket so we can share feedback with Noelia. And thanks so much again to the Cal State and all of our partners supporting this series.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
You too. Bye.
Bye.